Weeks ago, NATO announced it would send pilots and crews to the United States, to America, to help patrol American skies. It seems the U.S. military is stretched too thin to do it alone these days. So NATO crews, NATO AWACS jets are in the skies tonight. It was a remarkable announcement that got a bit lost in all that was happening in those early days. So we remind you of it tonight the best way we can by taking you aboard. Just outside Oklahoma City, one corner of an American Air Force base has undergone an overnight transformation. From a barely used section of Tinker Air Force Base into the headquarters of a squadron of NATO surveillance aircraft flying combat missions for the first time ever over American soil.
It's been a big shift in mindset. For the first time, we've had crews that are flying operational sorties in a homeland defense, trying to provide security for the nation.
For Air Force commanders like Colonel Jim Jones, the need for both planes and crews was urgent.
Due to the global commitments that we've had, we were starting to get stretched a little thin, and so NATO, for the first time, instituted Article 5. Their crews came over with immediate response capability, and it has been an absolutely seamless integration for them to fit in.
The planes are all AWACS, Airborne Warning and Control System. That huge circular dish on top holds all the sophisticated radar and sensors. The job? To look down from an orbit of 30,000 feet and create an electronic footprint for every single plane that flies into its very large range. And on this day, for a mission called Eagle Assist, we were allowed to ride along. It's the first time an American network has been allowed on a NATO flight like this since the new war began. The plane, called NATO 25, carries not one but two commanders. The pilot and the man in charge of the four-man flight crew is Canadian, who not long after we take off, spotted the AWACS aircraft he was relieving.
See that light over there? That's the E3 we're relieving.
It went speeding past just below our plane.
Unbelievable. I think that we all thought it was the last place we'd ever be deployed to defend. But however, at the same time, we all thought it was necessary.
In charge of the mission in back of the 13 technicians and weapons controllers is a German, a Luftwaffe major.
We exercised a lot in Europe and defending Europe, inside Europe, but coming over to the United States and defending the United States or contribute in the defense of the United States, that was what was totally unexpected to all of us.
There were rules, of course, once on board, no names or hometowns of anyone on the crew, no precise location of where NATO 25 went on its 14-hour mission. But the plane flew over the western United States, not the East Coast corridor, and for a very good reason.
This is basically a surveillance mission we are on tonight. We're somewhere overhead the United States and monitoring some agencies, some areas where the United States forces obviously have some special interest in.
At the consoles, technicians from 8 nations work side by side. A Canadian next to a Belgian, next to an American. Even men from ancient enemies, Turkey and Greece, working together. All essentially watching to see that no unauthorized plane encroaches into those colored areas, forbidden territory on the ground. And if that were to happen...
What we basically do is detect this aircraft, tell it down to the ground, to the command authority who are in charge for that area, who have the overall responsibility for it, and they do their proper actions as per their rules of engagement, whichever is in effect.
Those rules of engagement would apply to 2 F-16 fighters that NATO 25 had in its control. Controlled, in fact, by these men, American, Italian, German.
This is a real-life combat mission for us and for my team down here, and we are doing real-life operations.
Once in a while, the lights of American cities appeared below, but on what turned out to be a routine flight, the tension on board climbed only once, when it was time for a mid-air refueling, difficult enough during the day, far more so at night.
It's probably the most finesse flying that we have to do. And not having done it before in my previous tour. It was probably the most challenging thing that I had to overcome, but it's also the most rewarding.
Flying at night at just over 300 miles an hour, just yards away from a KC-135 tanker, the Canadian pilot and his crew are flawless. The two planes separated perfectly after nearly 45 minutes. 14 hours after it left its temporary headquarters, NATO 2-5 was back home, its crew exhausted but resolute.
You know, it's really worth it no matter what I'm called to do for this, because in the long run, this is for the safety of our children. And if I can do something now that helps make the world safe for my children, it's worth the sacrifice.
NATO patrolling American skies, one reason we call it America's new war. Coming up, the new reality of politics in America as parts of the country go to the polls tomorrow.